Hey there, Jordan Sheridan, live Status Coup happy hour edition in a very, 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 very unhappy time in the history of the United Corporations of America. I will give the audience the public service announcement that I lost my glasses this week. So I'm currently wearing glasses that are 5 years old. My prescription is very wrong. So if I misread some things, it's because I'm technically wearing glasses, but can't really see that well. I got to go get a new prescription tomorrow. It's going to take a week or two to get new glasses. So right now, I'm with you with the wrong prescription. Hello to my fellow I challenged journalist Walker Bragman on this happy hour. How you doing, sir?
I'm pouring myself a glass of wine. By the way, do you like my Batman mug?
I do. I am drinking a strawberry blonde beer, and I have no shame. I will say, you could drink along. If you like alcohol, great. If you don't, tea, kombucha, which technically has some alcohol in it, coffee, herbal, whatever. If you like more herbs for medicine, medicinal items, plants that are illegal in some states. Hey, we need to have some fun because it's really, 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 really scary out there right now, Walker. Dystopian, I'll say. I took a short staycation this week with my wife, but I kept up on the news, and it's kind of hard to follow. You have one horrible thing after the other. Obviously, a week ago, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, then the EPA, which was already kind of a shitty agency pre-Trump, which I could get into. But now it's really got no teeth because the Supreme Court gutted the EPA's ability to curb greenhouse gases. There was also a ruling, actually, that allowed states more power over Native American tribes. And now this wasn't ruled, but the Supreme Court is now going to hear election cases next term, which could basically continue the gerrymandering and other terrible things. So it's kind of hard to choose which one we start with. And again, it is happy hour, so drink along, smash that like button. But I guess let's start with the planet probably ending soon, thanks to the Supreme Court. Colin, if we could first bring up this New York Times story, a transformative term at the most conservative Supreme Court in nearly a century. The blockbuster decisions on abortion, guns, religion, and climate told part of the story, but the court's abrupt rightward shift ran through its entire docket. And I forgot tradition. I need to drink before we start. Hold on. Good strawberry beer. Delicious. Now, this New York Times story shows a chart, share of cases with a conservative ruling. And if you look through that chart, look at that spike at the end. That's 74% share of cases that have come down with a conservative ruling. It is up significantly, basically starting a couple years ago, as more and more conservative justices were on the court. Supreme Court moved relentlessly to the right in its first full term with 6-justice conservative majority, issuing far-reaching decisions that will transform American life, eliminated the constitutional right to abortion, recognized the Second Amendment right to carry guns outside the home. I completely forgot that one. Made it harder to address climate change, expanded the role of religion in public life. That's how dizzying what they've done in the last week and a half. I forgot those two. So we should add the concealed carry in New York, which is going to allow pretty much any Tom, Dick, and Harry to walk onto the subway, buses, trains, New York City specifically, with guns, and essentially saying to hell with the separation of church and state. We are going to allow public funding for private Catholic universities. We should start with the EPA ruling, just so, if people don't know kind of the nuts and bolts. This is from CNN. The Supreme Court on Thursday dealt a major blow to climate action by by handcuffing the EPA's ability to regulate planet-warming emissions from the country's power plants. Joe Manchin must be so thrilled. Just as scientists warned the world is running out of time to get the climate crisis under control, it's a major loss for not only the Biden administration's climate goals, but it also calls into question the future of federal level climate action and puts even more pressure on Congress to act to reduce emissions. I got a lot to say. I'll start with you, Walker. Obviously, you've done a lot of follow the money reporting. You have reported in various outlets about the right-wing money behind fossil fuels and things like that. But now, even the fantasy of Biden or Democrats doing something real on climate, if they had enough power, which I seriously doubt, basically the Supreme Court just made it very difficult for the EPA to actually achieve its mission statement, which is regulation.
So the Supreme Court basically invented new legal doctrine here in this case. So instead of going in and the old standard is sort of Chevron deference, and that's still intact technically. But the court used the major questions doctrine, which is sort of this seldom applied legal doctrine, which says that sometimes it's been a part of the Chevron test to basically say, no, if your rule as an administrative agency, if you're doing something and it's not explicitly stated in the law that you can do it, and then it involves sort of a major issue of major consequence, you can't do it. Like this doctrine comes into play. And the court relied on this to say that the EPA had overextended itself in regulating CO2 emissions under the Clean Air Act. And that's sort of where we're at now. So basically, it's not a death knell to environmental reform, but it's a bad ruling. And it makes it much harder for administrative agencies acting sort of in an ambiguous area, even addressing a crisis like climate change, to do their jobs. And that's troubling because we have a legislature that can't really legislate anymore. It's paralyzed by money. It's paralyzed by hyper partisanship, which is a result of gerrymandering and whatnot. So the court, it's sort of a 1-2 punch here. On the one hand, they're saying, we're sticking it to the EPA, but we're still handing it back to Congress, even though we know, this is the second part of it, even though we know Congress isn't going to do anything. And that's the real issue here, that the court is hiding behind this. Well, it's the job of the legislature. And ideally, that's probably true, but the legislature can't do anything, and we're facing an existential crisis.
So before I get into the caveats and the shitting on the EPA, and let's all take a drink because we have to try to have some happiness in these trying times. I am drinking a strawberry blonde beer. I have no shame in that. It's delicious. My wife says I drink too much, so this will be my only beverage today. But by this standard, couldn't the Supreme Court say, well, the Food and Drug Administration doesn't really have authority to monitor food, drugs. Congress shall do it. And I don't know, name your pick. What's next? The SEC doesn't have the ability to regulate financial institutions. I get what you're saying.
It all depends on the law, right? Like, because
they're making up the law in many cases.
Well, they are absolutely sort of pulling this out of nowhere. I mean, this major questions doctrine has been, it's sort of ad hoc applied sporadically since, I guess, the 90s, but never even mentioned in a majority opinion. And basically now any agency that's in doing something that involves matters of great economic or political significance is now going to have to point to specific congressional authorization to do what it's doing. And that's very limiting. It is very, because under the old standard, which is known as Chevron deference, they would typically look at it and say, is there authorization? And if yes, well, then fine. If there's no authorization, well, we tend to give deference to the administrative agency and their good faith reading of the law and their interpretation. But that's gone now. This new standard is much more exacting. It's a much higher bar for agencies to clear. And yeah, here's the reliance on the administrative state absolutely has increased as Congress has become less able to legislate. That's in part, it's gerrymandering, as I mentioned before. It's gerrymandering, it's money in politics. There are a lot of reasons why Congress is less effective today than it was 50 years ago. And that hasn't stopped the crises that we face. We're now facing climate change. We're facing a pandemic. We need to govern. And unfortunately, that's the main tool for that now is the administrative state. Now, whether or not that should be is, people can debate that, but it is the main tool for it. So if you're limiting the ability of the administrative state to act in the face of crisis, I mean, this ruling is ideological. It's not based on precedent. It's really a sham. And this court is, I mean, we're sitting here. It's Friday. We're drinking. So it'll be, I can say I think that the court is right now is a sham. This court is a sham. You've got two members who are sitting there who lied to get on the bench. You've got two justices who are credibly accused of sexual assault. You have one justice who was not qualified to sit on the bench. Got another who tried to conceal, tried to interfere with the investigation of January 6th to shield his wife. I mean, this court is. Oh,
you missed you missed the best one. Colin, do you have the? I put it in there somewhere. Clarence Thomas. It's under the COVID section. Clarence Thomas. Hold on. What did he say? That knuckling. Clarence Thomas said something about. God damn it! I can't find it. Hold on. Clarence Thomas. COVID. Aborted fetuses. Here it is. So Clarence Thomas cites a claim that COVID vaccines are developed using cell lines derived from aborted babies. Let me repeat. I just sent it to you, Colin. Clarence Thomas cites claim that COVID vaccines are developed using cell lines derived from aborted children. The conservative justice's statement came in a dissenting opinion on a case in which the Supreme Court declined to hear a religious liberty challenge to New York's COVID-19 vaccine mandate. So putting aside, and thank you for the super chat. We'll read them at the end, so keep those super chats coming. Putting aside, obviously that's not true. You basically have men and women on the Supreme Court that their statements in some of these dissenting opinions, you might have heard on like Newsmax or OANN, which was that crazy, further than Fox News, further than Newsmax, batshit right-wing channel. I don't even know if it's still on the air. These are the judges that are on the Supreme Court that believe in complete conspiracy quackery. And like you said, it's not like a question. Clarence Thomas was leaking information to his wife about Supreme Court deliberations. If that was Sotomayor, Kagan, Breyer, if they even...
He shouldn't be on the bench.
Right.
It's very clear that Thomas needs to go and that action should be taken. Again, though, we have a paralyzed Congress. And I have to say, part of the reason why we're seeing basically nothing from, Congress right now is that we have Democratic leadership. Democrats are in charge, which say what you will. It's the whole argument, stop the bleeding, but they're not really stopping the bleeding. They're really not doing much of anything, and they don't seem to have an appreciation for what's actually happening. I mean, this is the court for a long time. This court has leaned conservative, and its rulings have done things like make it harder to get into federal court in the first place. Like there are a couple cases back in the aughts during the Bush years that were like, you had to there's an increased bar to get into federal court. You have to not only state a plausible claim, but you have to have sufficient evidentiary basis for that claim. And that's a problem for people when the evidence typically comes out in discovery. Like I think in one of those cases, it involved a detainee, someone who was detained by the U.S. for alleged terrorism. And that detainee was trying to sue over torture, saying I've been tortured and this is systematic. And the court basically said, you don't have a sufficient evidentiary basis to make this claim. So you can't come into court. You can't go into federal court. And, it subsequently came out that in fact we were torturing detainees. So I think, that was a bad ruling. And this is sort of the direction that the court's been going. And as our legislature becomes increasingly paralyzed, the court becomes more powerful and more important. So,
right.
Yeah, it's pretty bleak. So again, drink if you got it, drink it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I want to show this tweet from Biden, because it's just, in a nutshell, this is the Democratic Party. Yesterday's Supreme Court ruling in West Virginia versus EPA aims to take our country backwards. Our fight against climate change must carry forward. My administration and I will leverage every authority to protect public health, keep our air clean, and tackle the climate crisis. So, number one, there's no specifics on what he's going to do. That's by design. Number two, I don't really know what the fight against his administration has been doing. He ran on stopping drilling on public lands, which wasn't enough as it is. He should have ran on just stopping drilling, but drilling on public lands has actually increased under him. He hasn't stopped it. He broke that campaign promise. Obviously, he hasn't really done anything to curb the fracking all over the country. We're now being shown that the whole energy independence thing as the reason given that we need to frack and have all these natural gas pipelines was bullshit anyway, because the minute Russia invaded Ukraine, we were up shit's creek. And he's now going to Saudi Arabia to beg for oil. So we've been exporting all of this oil from these frack gas pipelines, crude oil pipelines, to other countries. They're not for domestic use. But what's incredible to me is with the EPA decision, with Roe v. Wade, still, I can't do anything. I can't do anything. We can't do anything. I want to. This clip encapsulates it's even better. This isn't Biden, but this is Doug Jones, who was an Alabama senator. Colin, if you have that clip, who was in the running for Attorney General. He was a runner-up to Merrick Garland. He was on with Mehdi Hasan, and pretty much the same thing. Can't do anything. Let's play this.
I have to ask you, Doug Jones, who is to say the Supreme Court wouldn't just knock down any bill codifying Roe? And just Thursday, they gutted the EPA's ability to tackle climate change. And so I wonder, why aren't more Democrats talking about a plan for the court itself, not just term limits for justices, but expanding the court, rebalancing the court after Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell packed it?
Well, I think because they're talking about reality. And reality is that you're not going to pack the Supreme Court. We got to be very practical here. We can talk about pie in the sky things that we would love to do if we had, an 80-person majority, but we can't do that. And you're not going to pack the Supreme Court. It's not going to happen. And I understand that that's frustrating to a lot of people, but it's frustrating to the very same people who should have made sure that we were putting people in place voting for the last 20 years. Republicans did that, and now they have the court, and we've got to get people organized and get out there to vote. I do think you're right. It would be a challenge. Anything that the Congress does is going to get challenged in a court of law, but we've got to make sure we do it. That doesn't mean that we don't do it. We've got to do everything we can in the states get people out to vote, get the things changed that we can in the states, and get the Congress changed. I am glad to see the president wanting a carve out for the filibuster on abortion rights. I think it would be very, very important to do that. It is, as we've talked about, Mehdi, a slippery slope, because if we don't get out there and vote, and I say we being a Democrat, we're going to have a Republican president and a Republican Congress that will undo everything.
Here's my issue, Doug Jones, where you say pie in the sky. And I accept it's not an easy lift to, it hasn't been done for several decades, but it has changed size many times before the Supreme Court. In fact, the Republicans brought it down to 8 for an entire year in 2016. I understand it's not easy and it's an ambitious goal. But if you're saying it can't be done, then what you're saying then is the Supreme Court can shoot down abortion rights, shoot down gun rights, shoot down voting rights, allow Republican gerrymandering, allow independent state legislature theory, which they plan to do later this year, shoot down the separation of church and state. And Democrats can do nothing. You're saying there's nothing we can do as that rogue court basically overturns precedent, overturns laws.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all, Maddie. You're misinterpreting.
So what can be done?
No, that's not what I said. I said Democrats can do a lot of things. They can get their butts out and vote. They can start electing people and get a majority in the United States Senate and start.
All right, no more. No more. I need a drink. Hold on.
Oh my God, it's just pathetic. It's like, look, first of all, the court.
Wait, Colin. I need the sound effect for it to really work.
I just look, the court is doing things that the Republicans can't do because they're so unpopular, and the Democratic response is just, nothing. They're rolling over and saying, well, you got to vote. We can't do it. First of all, let's be honest about this. All it would take is 51 votes to eliminate the filibuster, and then a simple majority, 51 votes, to pack the court, limit its jurisdiction, require unanimous opinions on certain cases. Like Congress can limit the court. Congress is a more powerful branch than the judiciary. It inherently is, because it can fuck with the judiciary. You don't have to sit back and allow this to happen. The fact that they are it just reveals the inherent weakness of this Democratic Party, this establishment that exists, that's held on to its power, with a ferocity again when it comes to progressive insurgents. But then when it comes to the Republicans, they roll over and on their backs and they're positively supine. I mean, it's unbelievable. Congress is an active branch of government. Congress makes the laws. It controls the purse strings. The courts are reactive. Nothing in the Constitution denoting a number of justices that have to be on that bench. We could rotate those justices. We can expand the court. There's a lot of things that Congress can do if it's willing. And the issue here is not that we don't have enough Democrats. It's that the Democrats that we have aren't willing to do that. That's the problem.
So a few things, and keep those super chats coming. We will read them as we go. By the way, we do have comments from haters, which we'll read later. I'll address the haters. I haven't seen any of the comments yet, so I'll be seeing them for the first time with you. Get your drink if you're coming into this late, and please smash that like button. Almost 300 people watching. Not everyone has pressed the like button. Thumbs up on this terrible, terrible week. A couple things. Number one,
that's a lot to ask, Jordan. It's like just to hit the button harder.
I know.
If you don't like what you're hearing, hit the button harder.
Exactly. And I am wearing my Fossil Fucker shirt. You could go get that in the Status Coup store. That's statuscoup.com/store. Get your Fossil Fucker shirt this summer for the beach. Now, FDR, who, remember, the media all at once wrote these hot takes that Biden was FDR, which was kind of comical last year. FDR just threatened to expand the court and made Republicans back down. What makes Biden, who the media is cheering that he said yes, I will accept I'm for a carve out for the filibuster for Roe v. Wade, right? But he won't actually fight for it.
Well, yeah, he said that.
Wait.
But then
Predictably, Manchin and Sinema came out. They said we will not be for that, and that's it. What kind of president? I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, whatever. President, some of the best presidents, it's about leadership, right? It's about galvanizing the American people, giving them a vision, sparking them to rally together in some cases in times of war and other cases. Biden could very, very simply do a press conference, do a speech, go to West Virginia, go to Arizona, and point out, well, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, they didn't seem to have a problem waiving the filibuster to raise the debt limit, something that is important, but I'd argue not as important as women not dying in back alley abortions. They also, I'm forgetting, they waived the filibuster for one other thing. So they are not against waiving the filibuster for things that are on a lot smaller scale than this. The president could do that. I would argue it's not that it's faulty leadership why he's not doing it. I would argue the powerful interests in this country that run both parties actually like the filibuster. They like the status quo. Now, they wouldn't mind the filibuster being carved out for like these social things or, abortion rights or, something on guns, but they don't want it gone completely because then, wow, you could actually do both. Hey, you could raise the minimum wage with the 51 vote threshold. You could pass health care and those kind of things. So that's what I think is happening. I don't think the Democratic Party donors that run this country want the filibuster gone. And real quick, I would say, what makes Biden and Schumer and Pelosi and these fucking old septuagenarian hacks, what makes them think that if the Republicans retake the House, if the Republicans retake the Senate, and the Republicans retake the White House, that the Republicans aren't going to say, fuck the filibuster and pass a national abortion ban, among other things?
Of course they will. Of course. Look, it might not happen immediately, but that's really what they're aiming for. And they'll deny it or whatever. It's states' rights. It's states' rights right up until the point where they take power, and then it's federal supremacy all the way. I really, look, I think a big part of the problem here, Jordan, is that Biden has been extremely ineffectual at utilizing and building political capital. I think that's probably his biggest weakness as president. I mean, let's just think about this presidency for a second and go through his accomplishments or lack thereof. So he comes into office amid a surging pandemic. And he had campaigned on I'm going to get this virus under control. Well, within a few months, the administration shifted to it's over. We got to live with it. We can't really do anything to stop it. And they let protections expire, like expanded unemployment assistance. They let the eviction moratorium expire. And now eventually, there was pressure from Cory Bush, and Biden had to sort of step in and try to revive the eviction moratorium. But at that point, it was too late, and the court shot him down. The thing is, when Biden took office, he had very high approval ratings. And he had that, you got that honeymoon period. Any new president has a honeymoon period in which that's when you're supposed to expend your political capital. If you're gonna do it, you got to do it then, because everybody is with you. They're waiting to see what you're going to do. Spend political capital early. Do the things you absolutely need to do first. Hopefully that will generate enough support so that you can continue pushing your agenda. Unfortunately, Biden wasted that on a moderate pandemic relief bill that and then immediately basically said the crisis is over, we solved it, which gives up a ton of leverage, right? You have all of this in a national emergency, which is what COVID is, an ongoing national emergency. I don't, I'm sure that we're going to get hate in the comments for that, but that is the reality. This virus continues to spread. It continues to mutate. It continues to debilitate people, and it continues to kill people. You haven't even mentioned monkeypox, which he has no plan for. But go ahead. Right. But if all the things that we needed to do to address COVID were in place and we'd done them, monkeypox would be a walk in the park. Monkeypox is not the Omicron variant. It's not as contagious. It's not it's more containable. We can do it. But we didn't do that. And Biden said crisis is over. So that freed up people like Manchin and Sinema to be like, well, crisis is over. I can sort of stake out my own path here. And then he wastes valuable time fighting for infrastructure, which undeniably is important, but it's not as important as voting rights. And we put off voting rights for, almost until, I want to say until August. They start fighting for voting. They start talking about voting rights in August, September. Mm-hmm. At that point, it's too late to ban gerrymandering. The maps are already being drawn. I mean, the failure at prioritization of the big things that you need to do, get the pandemic under control, shore up democratic institutions, then go to climate resiliency and infrastructure, and then get to the court. Do what you have to do. He didn't do it. Biden came in and was like, we gotta do something. Remember that infrastructure fight? There was months of negotiations, and finally Biden weighs in and says, we got to separate the bills because we got to get something done. And the second he did it, Build Back Better was dead. Right. So he didn't get infrastructure, and then he moved on to voting rights, didn't get that, and then police reform, didn't get that. It's just one thing after another, but it all goes back to this pattern of failure to use political capital, failure to prioritize the things that really need to be done in order to cement your legacy. And now, amid a fight where the Supreme Court has gone rogue, and now facing that court, he has no political capital. He has very little means to sway Manchin or Sinema. Now, he could be doing what you said and holding rallies in Arizona and West Virginia. But
yeah, I actually disagree with that. I think that people, okay. I think that people forget Biden for a second. I think Trump showed you how powerful the presidency is. He used it for bad, for bad things. He used it basically as a cudgel for his insanity, and we're going to get to some of that in a bit. But whether Manchin and Sinema would or would not fold, these two have not actually been pressured by power. No offense to the activists that have pressured them. There's been people who, paddled to Manchin's yacht and, almost jumped on his Lamborghini. Yes, he has a Lamborghini. Yes, he has a yacht. There was activists who, followed Manchin Sinema into the bathroom. That's great. I'm not knocking those efforts. We need activism. But other than by reports and angry voicemail, Biden left Manchin at one point, neither of these two have faced the full wrath of the presidential bully pulpit, the media that basically is in the tank for the Democratic Party. So if Biden goes on a public crusade, then the media covers it because they can't avoid conflict. And not only on Roe v. Wade, not only on climate, I'm talking a public crusade. These are the two Democrats blocking you from a livable planet, codifying Roe v. Wade, paid sick leave. I could go down the list. Okay. That's pressure that these two have not felt. I actually think Manchin, it has already been shown, has an incredibly thin skin. If the president does that, that activates the base. Hell, I even think progressives who can't stand Joe Biden might jump on board, not out of love for Joe Biden. So I bring this up not specifically about Manchin and Sinema, but just in general. When your whole political thought, when your whole political mentality is, well, we don't have the votes. Well, there's nothing we could do. Well, it's always something. Then you're not actually fighting. People actually will reward you for fighting, even if you don't get the results. Trump didn't build a wall. None of the people who wanted that stupid wall care because he he fought for it and he screamed about it and he started it. Right. He's not fighting. Doug Jones of the world. Oh, we need to be realistic. Why is it unrealistic to pack the court? All Biden would have to do is make these two senators. I think there's a much better chance, Walker, of making two senators fold than try to get extremist Republicans to do anything.
Oh no, I completely agree with that. I think Biden should be bringing the entire weight of his office down on Manchin and Sinema. Sinema is in a state that he won. and Manchin, I mean, his family is involved in some really shady shit, like
illegal shit. Go ahead.
Yeah, like come on, you can't pressure these two people, and shoot, like they should tell Manchin, you like being the top dog. As a Democrat, you're top dog, and people come to you, media comes to you. We look to you as the decider here, but we're going to kick you off of your committees. And if you join the Republicans, you're a fucking nobody at that point. And then we get to run somebody against you anyway.
Walker, not just kick him off committees. He's the chairman of the Senate Energy Committee.
I know.
He's the
I know.
chairman.
It's a farce. Okay.
It's just, but I'm saying he's not a backbencher. He's the chairman of the Senate Energy Committee. Biden should have stripped him when he was blocking Build Back Better and pointed out the conflict. You can't be regulating or chairing a committee on regulation when you have a coal plant. Sorry, go ahead.
Look, also, investigate the guy. Investigate his criminal fucking family. But like this is sort of like a make or break moment for democracy in America. Like the system that we're seeing is falling apart. And by the way, I just want to address something here because I see this a lot online, and it's like, well, you guys should have, 2016 was the time. 2016 mattered. In 2016, there were Senate elections in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, 2 states that Clinton needed to win. There was not a Senate election in Michigan. So Clinton's performance there ostensibly wouldn't have it would have mattered to her election, but it wouldn't have mattered to the Senate composition. But even if she had won Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, she still would have lost the Senate. And then the 2018 Senate elections, Democrats were defending, I think, 26 seats. Republicans were defending 9. And the difference was 10 seats. I don't,
Walker, do me a favor. Pick up that wine. I need a drink before I address the Hillary Clinton supporters. Thank you very much. Oh, I was on a staycation, so I tried not to get involved. Just a reminder. I know it's a sin to say this because she's Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Ruth Bader Ginsburg could have retired from 2009 to 2015. She didn't. Whatever, Jordan, she had a right not to, blah, blah, blah. She wanted to retire when the first woman president was there. Well, that's selfish. She was 80-something years old, multiple bouts of cancer. She should have retired. But putting that aside, it's not Walker's fault or my fault. And by the way, I get shit because I voted for Biden in 2020. But it's not people who didn't vote for. Yeah. Actually, the reason
neither you nor I were like, everybody, please vote for Biden.
Right.
Bullshit.
But Walker, these same yes queens that are trying to blame progressives, they don't want to actually blame the actual people that cost Hillary Clinton the election because they get shit for it. And I'm not blaming them. Hillary Clinton lost because less black people came out in Milwaukee, Detroit, and I forget the other state. I'm not blaming them. That she didn't give them a reason to come out. The New York Times had a spread about black people in Milwaukee saying, no, I don't regret it. So they don't want more Bernie people came out for Hillary Clinton than Hillary Clinton people came out for Obama.
All of that is irrelevant anyway, because you can't put justices on a court if you don't have the Senate.
Correct.
And they did not win the Senate in 2016. They weren't even close. And that was a favorable year. I mean, that was more Republican seats were up for re-election than Democratic seats. 2018, the midterms, actually was a really bad year in terms of what the map looked like because a lot more Democrats were defending than Republicans. Right. And even in a wave election, I mean, 2018 undeniably was a wave election. Democrats took the House. They still did not, they lost ground in the Senate. Like, imagine if Clinton had been president. Midterm elections typically favor the opposition party. That's sort of a pattern because, especially today, when presidents don't really get much done. So it's like, oh well, they're fucking up. Let's throw the bums out and get new people in. So it typically doesn't favor the party. But if Clinton didn't have the Senate in 2016 and 2016 to 2018 doesn't have the Senate, what's she going to get done? 2018 happens, Democrats have to somehow pull a miracle and win, I guess all of the seats that are the Republican seats that are up. I just don't see it. I think that conversation is like, it's irrelevant at this point. It's like, you are where you are. Democrats have a trifecta now. They have to act. They have to pack this court. You don't have an option. You have to either pack this court or rein it in somehow. I shouldn't say packing is the only option, but rein the court in. And if you don't do it, you're gambling on maybe having more of a more control after the midterms, which don't look like they're going to go well for you anyway. Like, you have to do it now. Use power when you have it. This is the lesson that Republicans continually teach Democrats. Use power when you have it. Make the Republicans, make them roll back everything. Get rid of the filibuster. If Republicans get in, make them roll back everything. Make them get rid of your.
But do you disagree with me? I know you might, but do you disagree with me that the reason Biden doesn't want to get rid of the filibuster is not because he's a Senate, nostalgic for Senate parliamentarian rules. I don't think the actual power centers of this country want less votes in the Senate required as legislation. I think the donors like the filibuster because all the filibuster, when you have a filibuster, all that it creates is these mealy-mouthed, incremental, non-consequential, bipartisan deals, like the infrastructure deal, like
I don't disagree with you, but I also think there's more to it. I think that Biden himself, as a candidate, and this is something that during the primary, I was doing a lot of reporting on Biden, digging up sort of his past, like those videos where he's talking about freezing Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and veterans benefits. Like Biden himself, as somebody, his ideology is inherently neoliberal. He is a, dyed-in-the-wool neoliberal Democrat. That is what he is. That's how he came up. That's the system that he came up in, and that's where he found built his profile. I think Biden is inherently unwilling. He can't conceive of the kind of response that this Supreme Court warrants, that this moment warrants. I don't think he was ever really capable of that. And as Trump was his presidency was monstrous. He tried to pull off a coup. He let 400,000 Americans die because he embraced a herd immunity through infection strategy that has been thoroughly discredited despite our continued insistence on it. Trump had to go, but the question I think which progressives are rightly asking is, was Biden the right choice to do that? And I think the answer to that is probably no. Right. I don't think Biden was ever really up to this challenge, and I think he's exactly who the left said he was going to be. And his presidency has been a profound waste of power and opportunity. And you gotta put up a challenger in 2024. They need a challenger.
Before moving on to our next catastrophe, drink up. The folks at home are drinking along. I'm drinking a strawberry beer. Walker is a little classier with wine. I don't want to spend that much time on this, but I gotta say, I think this January 6th hearing that happened the other day was pretty mind-blowing because what it shows is we already have a system in which bankers that crashed the global economy, which a lot of people have still never recovered from, were never brought to justice. We have a system where oil executives that poison waterways, whole communities are not prosecuted. They're fined. We have a system where you could poison a whole city in Flint. We'll get to Rick Snyder in a few minutes. His charges were dropped. Nobody's held accountable for that.
How does that, after 2 years of, not 2 years, after years of reporting on that crisis, I mean, that's got to feel like a kick in the teeth, man. Like,
it is. We'll get to that.
You've done just a ton of work exposing that, and to have it result in a nothing burger, like.
That's probably going to be beer number 2. So we'll wait for that. But you have basically this precedent that, I mean, there's just a different legal system for the powerful and wealthy, and then the rest of us, are fucked. Particularly black people, indigenous people, brown people, disabled people, etc. So, literally, you have. I genuinely don't see any reason why this 26-year-old had to lie or perjure herself. There's really no benefit in it for her. She could have been like all the rest of the Trumpites, just not complied. Not gone, agreed to speak with them, but not given much. So it doesn't really, from the reporting, she seems to be a true believer. She's conservative. She was honored to work for the Trump administration. So there's no real reason for her to lie. I know the headlines was, Trump lunging at the Secret Service agent's throat. That was obviously the major headlines. I personally think that was like 0.4 or 5 in terms of headlines. To me, that wasn't the most important thing. She wasn't saying, Colin, do we have that clip just so people could hear it? Her talking about Trump lunging at a Secret Service agent.
Did you effing hear what happened in the Beast? I said, no, Tony, I just got back. What happened? Tony proceeded to tell me that when the president got in the Beast, he was under the impression from Mr. Meadows that the off-the-record movement to the Capitol was still possible and likely to happen, but that Bobby had more information. So once the president had gotten into the vehicle with Bobby, he thought that they were going up to the Capitol, and when Bobby had relayed to him, we don't have the assets to do it, it's not secure, we're going back to the West Wing. The president had very strong, a very angry response to that. Tony described him as being irate. The president said something to the effect of, I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now. To which Bobby responded, sir, we have to go back to the West Wing. The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol. Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. And when Mr. Renato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
So, again, number one, she's not saying she personally witnessed that. She's recounting what she says she was told. I don't really see a really credible reason this 26-year-old would have to lie about a story she was told. Perjury is a crime technically in America. But putting all that aside, whether it's true or not, because it's disputed, let's wait for these Secret Service agents to go under oath and say they never said that. She's under oath. They're not. And from some reports, they're very loyal to President Trump. But putting all that aside, revelations came out that are not being disputed. Number one, Trump on January 6th said, get rid of the metal detectors. I don't care if they have weapons. They're not going to hurt me.
Yep.
So knew his armed supporters were armed, not all of them, but some, and was urging them to march to the Capitol. I'm not a lawyer. I know you studied law. To me, there's some type of intent in there. Number two, this wasn't covered as much, but I think it's relevant. There was a meeting on the evening of January 5th where Mark Meadows apparently called in. This woman convinced him not to go, but he called in. Well, I don't think they were talking about the weather. They were talking about the next day. Again, to me, that shows some planning. They know, they've been hearing the reports that violence is coming in. Apparently, Rudy Giuliani was talking about the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys. I bring all this up because to me, Trump didn't have to himself say, go kill people. To me, the things she revealed indicate, and again, the things I'm talking about, those things were not disputed, that he knew violent people were there and he was urging them to march and in his speech, fight. And why I think that's important, mixed with the meeting the night before, I think it was at a restaurant or somewhere where the chief of staff called in, is if he gets away with this, because a lot of quote unquote leftists who call themselves leftists have done everything they can to minimize this whole day.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal that the president of the United States told Department of Justice officials to just say the election was corrupt and leave the rest to him. Like, that's not a big deal. That's a fucking huge deal. He tried to pull off a coup. It is plainly obvious. If he suffers no consequences for it, someone else is going to do it successfully.
No, but it's more than that. From what she is sharing, again, these facts have not been disputed. He was willing to pull off an armed coup, meaning, oh, they're not going to hurt me. Well, that inference is, well, they'll hurt them, but not me, right? And also, but also, there's reports that the only reason he sent out the message for his people to go home is because the 25th Amendment came up to him. I don't know if that's true or not, but that has been reported. So to me, why this is important, you don't have to have Trump derangement syndrome. I didn't cover Trump 24/7 when he was president like everyone else. But if he gets away with this, it's the same principle if Rick Snyder gets away with this in Flint. What makes you think other governors and cities aren't going to cut corners on water or other things? Well, if Trump gets away with this, what makes you think, I don't know, President Ron DeSantis, who the media is trying to frame as, a more palatable version of Trump, less crazy.
No, he's just a more competent fascist.
What makes you think mini-me's, who have, delusions of grandeur, wouldn't attempt this too? And when they attempt it, they won't need a January 6th because already the Republicans throughout states in this country are trying to remove some of the state officials that certify the election and put Trump loyalists in. So to me, this is less about, I've always said I'll put down the very little money I have. Trump would never see a jail cell, but he should at least, in my view, be prosecuted because there is enough evidence. I don't know if there's enough to convict him on sedition or any of that stuff, but there's enough evidence that his administration and him knew of the warnings of violence, and he particularly egged it on, knew about it, and then egged on armed people to march to the Capitol. And whether he lunged or not, there is enough that he was really fighting, whether physically or not, to actually go to the Capitol himself with those supporters, many of whom he knew might be armed.
He should be prosecuted, and he should be barred from holding or seeking public office again. And his supporters will be up in arms over it, but who gives a fuck? Because, this is, we are so close. We are on the brink of losing our democracy. And it's not just Trump. Trump is not the exclusive reason why we're here. We've been trending that way for many years, really since Reagan. But this is an extremely dangerous moment. We are very precariously perched on the edge of autocracy. And I really think that, if he faces no consequences, don't be surprised when the next president or whoever it is says, I don't think I'm gonna honor this election result.
And by the way, just to correct you, we don't actually have a democracy worth saving. 4 of these Supreme Court justices were appointed by a president who lost the popular vote. George W. Bush stole the election. 5. Who was the 5th?
Well, look.
Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Coney Barrett, Alito, Clarence Thomas. Oh, actually, you're right, because John Roberts was George W. Bush too.
Although I think Roberts was appointed during his second term, if I'm not mistaken. So when he did win the popular vote, but he wouldn't have been president in the first place. So we still count him. Yeah, correct. No, look, the U.S. democracy in the U.S. is always calling the U.S. as democracy has always been fraught, but I want to stress to people that things could always be worse. I think people on the left have a tendency, and I myself probably fall into this as well, of sort of talking as if everything is already lost, and there's so much more that could be lost. And if anything, this moment just shows that there is so much more that can be lost. We're in a way, we're actually fortunate with this EPA ruling that they didn't just say, They didn't just just strike down the, had a much broader ruling that could have really gutted the administrative state and made it impossible and untenable and ruled it unconstitutional. I mean, our entire system of government could have just collapsed. It's look, we are imperfect. Our system of government is extraordinarily imperfect, and a lot of people have suffered for that imperfection. Unfortunately, the same groups suffer over and over again for that imperfection, but that does not mean that the alternatives that are available to us in this moment are desirable or inconsequential,
right, and
could not be worse. So absolutely. I would really urge people to, with this, we're not a democracy. Okay, but consider the alternatives.
And can I just say, and I'll get some haters for this, but I don't really care.
That are possible.
Let me get a little sip in before I invite the haters. I'm just really sick of like Glenn Greenwald and these whatever they are these days, leftists, even though he doesn't call himself a leftist. It's really interesting that Glenn Greenwald and these so-called leftists like to minimize this. And Glenn Greenwald, the only things he had to say, you always notice that during really bad things for Republicans, Glenn Greenwald isn't tweeting. He doesn't tweet a lot when really bad things happen for Republicans. He comes back a day later, and he tweeted seizing on the dispute over this young lady, Cassie Hutchinson, where she shared that Trump lunged at the Secret Service neck. And he said, well, that's being disputed, and basically tried to distract from all the other. He's a lawyer. He knows that was not the biggest thing. He knows that the president of the United States, this is a man, I would say heroically too, reported on Bolsonaro's abuses in Brazil. So he knows when democracy is being threatened, not that, Brazil is like the strongest.
But his buddy Tucker is right. A friend of Bolsonaro.
This is the man that Tucker Carlson just stood in a picture with Bolsonaro with a native headdress, which no non-native should be wearing. There is no context for that. That's appropriate. And Greenwald was like, I don't know the context. So these.
Yeah, whoa. We gotta contextualize his entire brand. Greenwald has sort of a.
Not to mention, by the way, for those that love him, he's pro Citizens United. He's pro Citizens United. And honestly, if you look at his positions over the years, he does tend to lean right. I would be totally fine if he was conservative. Just admit it. Just say, listen, as time has gone on, I'm more conservative. That's, I still care about freedom of speech, blah, 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 blah. But I'm more, right wing. It's the same thing with Fox News. I've never had an issue that they're a conservative network. It's just pretending you're otherwise. So I'm bringing up Glenn.
You can't take on corporate power if you're pro Citizens United and pro Buckley. Right. You cannot do it. It's just a bullshit position. The entire problem, our biggest problem in America today, in our system of government, the biggest hole that we have is the fact that we allow wealthy elites and corporations to spend unlimited sums of money on political advocacy. That skews the conversation. It drowns out regular people's voices. No matter how much you care about an issue and you want to speak out, and you can get thousands of people in the streets about an issue. But if you're not able to compete with a billionaire in terms of donations to a candidate, your voice doesn't matter as much. I'm sorry, it just does not. You cannot be somebody who challenges corporate power if you think that corporations and wealthy corporate interests and billionaires should be able to spend as much as they want on elections. That is not democracy. That is not what free speech looks like. That is a perversion of both. So right. No, Greenwald is not a leftist. He's never been a leftist. And for somebody whose entire brand, by the way, is criticizing the mainstream, he sure does seem to derive a lot of his personal validity from his ability to go on mainstream news or his award, his Pulitzer.
I don't bring up Glenn. Because to me, it's not only about Glenn. Glenn is kind of one cog in what's becoming kind of this, like, I don't know, pseudo leftist thing where, like, because we only want to focus on the Democratic Party, we basically kind of like look the other way to Republican extremism under this weird thought that, like, you can't do both. And you can do both. And you should call out Republican extremism. You should call out fascism. You should call out a coup, because they weren't marching to the Capitol to make a point. They wanted to stop the results of the election and keep the loser in power. That is the definition of a coup. That is the definition of a coup attempt. In other countries, the military is utilized. But when you're trying to overturn the election and keep the loser in power, that is a coup. But you've had this cottage industry, because it's kind of like, well, if you're calling this out, that means you're like Team Democrat. No, it just means you're Team Democracy. I don't fucking like
the Democrats has become a substitute for genuine ideology, and yes, that is a real problem, because look, Jordan, I would not.
I just wanted to show this. I like Glenn Griftwald. That's good, Chris.
I would not call you somebody who likes the Democratic Party. I think you have consistently reported on its shortcomings, on individual party leaders, on their shortcomings. You've called it out. You've called out the ideological shortcomings of the party. That said, you also cover the extremism of the right wing. I mean, the Republican Party today treats violence as an acceptable part of the political discourse. It is engulfed in conspiracy mongering. It fetishizes punishment of undesirables. It glorifies violence. This is a party that is descending into autocracy, if not completely, almost completely, and that is extraordinarily dangerous. Like in Weimar Germany, conservatives thought they could contain the fascists. You can't contain the fascists. You have to vigorously and vehemently oppose them. This Republican Party today, people, its leaders, its emerging leaders are fascist. You should call them by their name. That is exactly what they are. Absolutely. And as bad as the Democrats are, call them out too. The biggest problem with the Democratic Party is that they enable and do not challenge the fascist Republican Party. That is their biggest problem, fundamentally. So, keep it's not an ideology. Hating Democrats and loving to dunk on Democrats, look, it's important. Do it. Dunk on the Democrats. Call them out. But hating them is not an ideology in and of itself. And one area I think where this is,
I just want to point this out, because this is also a broader problem with the internet. And Gene, I'm sure you're a nice lady, so I'm not trying to pick on you. I just unsubscribed. I can't stand this level of hate and lies about someone who is a fantastic journalist. This is also a problem. We live in this tribal culture that if people's heroes are ever criticized, unsubscribe. You don't have to agree with me, but look it up. Glenn Greenwald is for Citizens United. He wrote about it years ago.
And he hides it behind, I agree with the ACLU. If you ask him about it today, he'll tell you, and he has said this, I agree with the ACLU's position on Citizens United and Buckley. The ACLU in Citizens United and Buckley was on the side that said unlimited political spending is what has to happen. That is what the First Amendment is. It's spending money is a form of speech. It's bullshit. That is not what free speech is. It is a perversion of free speech. And the fact that Glenn Greenwald has the temerity to even come out and say, that's my position, it undermines every time he tries to frame himself as anti-establishment, as, you're not anti-establishment. You are a clever, but not so clever, tool of that establishment. You're not challenging corporate power.
But also, here's the thing, Walker. This goes beyond Glenn Greenwald. This is to the left. And I started seeing this. People need to remember I've traveled for the last 7 years. So I've pretty much seen it all. Okay. I've covered Bernie's campaign. I covered Trump's campaign. I've covered local politics. I probably covered 150 rallies of all political stripes. I covered the Green Party. I covered some MPP things. I've covered Flint, homelessness, protests, you name it. I think I've been to 35, 36 states by my count over the last 7 years. That doesn't make me brilliant, but I just have an up close perspective. Okay. It's not a matter of whether the Democratic Party is corrupt or not. It is. And if you watch Status Coup, I probably cover that 60 to 70% of the time. The problem is when your favorite journalists, hosts, news outlets, Twitter people, TikTokers, whatever, you're either against corruption wherever it comes from or you're not. You're either against extremism wherever it comes from or you're not. You're either against prejudice wherever it comes from or you're not. You're either against censorship wherever it comes from or you're not. So if you have core principles against those things, and I'm forgetting some of the things that people should be against, either you have core principles and you're willing to go at it from anywhere or you're not. I'll give you an example. Colin knows this. A couple months ago, I was reached out to by somebody in Florida. I won't go into details, but an LGBTQ person, right? Who was telling me that his friends are all suicidal and depressed. And this Don't Say Gay bill in Florida is making LGBTQ teens even more suicidal. Now, not because I don't care, but typically we cover economic stuff, corruption, not those social issues. But this person's story to me really struck a nerve, because if you're progressive, you should care about all oppression, right? Black, brown, LGBTQ, forget progressive. If you're a good person, you should care. So I said, you know what, Colin, we're probably going to lose money on this trip. Probably nobody's going to watch, but we're going to go to Florida. Colin, come on for a second. How many people watched our live streams when we were in Florida? 100?
Yeah, I think it averaged 1 to 150 around there.
Yeah. We actually went bad timing. It was a Supreme Court hearing for Ketanji Brown. It was the beginning of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So we got drowned out. But even if those things weren't happening, I don't really know if a lot of these leftists really cared, because there's become an industry where they only want to watch shit that's about the Democratic Party. And this was really about Ron DeSantis pushing a gag order. That's what it is, on gay teachers and gay students. And I don't care what anyone has to say. I read the bill. I read it twice, which is pretty boring. It is a gag order on LGBTQ teachers and students. And I went there because we were going to lose money. Not because, but I knew we were going to lose money. And we did. We made no money off that trip. It was a money suck, but it was the right thing to do, and we covered it. I don't say that for a pat on the back. I say that because if the Democratic Party was doing anything like that, you better fucking believe Glenn Greenwald would be leading the charge on Twitter. So would Jimmy Dore. Anything about restricting talk about LGBTQ or restricting teachers from even not saying they have a husband or a wife of the same sex.
Oh yeah.
So that's what I mean by you don't have core principles. You do not have core principles if you will only call things out when it is the Democratic Party. And when the Republicans do it, it's kind of like, wink, wink. Well, we already knew that. Well, is that breaking news? Another example.
Like, oh, we knew this.
Free speech warrior Glenn Greenwald has said nothing about the fact that Ron DeSantis banned protests in residential neighborhoods. So again, to Gene or anybody else, oh, you're attacking my hero, unsubscribed, goodbye. Because if you are not open, this doesn't mean cancel those people. You could watch or support whoever you want. But if you're not even going to think like, well, why aren't they covering those things? That's a problem. We could walk and chew gum at the same time. We could cover Democratic Party corruption, which I do plenty, and call out Republican extremism and fascism. And why they don't is because a lot of their audience, more and more of their audience, is right wing.
That's the reason. Absolutely. You're 100% spot on. And by the way, I just sent you over Twitter a tweet that you may want to throw up on the screen so that everybody can see what we're talking about. But look, you don't have to love everything. Personalities, big personalities on Twitter or social media do or say. You don't. I sometimes get things wrong. I 100% acknowledge that, Jordan. I'm sure you'd say the same thing. People get things wrong sometimes, but in terms of just moral, standing by your moral principles, either you are against, if you focus on issues, doesn't really matter who fucks up, which side fucks up. If you are consistent on an issue and you're willing to call out when, both parties, fuck up, I can respect that. What I don't respect is the hypocrisy of just focusing on one side and being and the whole brand. I guess the whole brand now, from this sort of contrarian viewpoint, is everything the Democrats do is hysterical or hypocritical, and everything the Republicans do, at least, they're being honest.
Right.
And that's,
well, they're being honest. They're being honest while they're stripping women of their rights to health.
But at least they're honest. At least they're honest about it. It's a tempting, I guess that there's a tempt. If you really hate Democrats, I can see why that would appeal, but that's not an accurate picture.
The problem is, and by the way, Status Coup viewers know, I've been saying this for years. The problem is people like Glenn, people like Jimmy, whatever, whether it's intentional or not, it really doesn't matter. They've created this false paradigm where if you point out or you cover this Republican extremism, you're somehow, sheep herding people into the Democratic Party, or you somehow are Team Blue, or you somehow are, MSN. That's the one I love. Oh, you're just like MSN when you're pointing out a coup attempt or this and that. No, you can cover Republican extremism, corruption, and do it in a way that's not like MSNBC. But the point is, how I know people are full of shit is I know for a fact if any Democrat had tried to pass a law that restricted talk of LGBTQ anything, Jimmy Dore and Glenn Greenwald will be the first ones talking about it. So you're not focused on the actual issues if you're only focused on who is the one doing it. And if you're a warrior for free speech and against censorship, I don't know how you're quiet on the fact that Ron DeSantis wants to criminalize BDS in Florida. Okay? Ron DeSantis wants to criminalize BDS. I haven't heard anything from Glenn Greenwald or Jimmy Dore on that. Ron DeSantis banned protests in residential neighborhoods, i.e. in front of politicians' homes and judges' homes. Ron DeSantis signed a bill to make it legal for anybody to run over protesters in Florida. Okay? So the point is, do not tell me that you are such a free speech warrior when you take a nap when it's Republicans doing it. Anyway, I kind of got sidetracked on that.
There also, somebody in the chat pointed out that Chris in the chat points out that Dore, Greenwald are pushing a mainstream solution for COVID. It's absolutely accurate. I mean, this is my favorite part about it. I know that this conversation has sort of trailed into, we started on the Supreme Court and now we're just sort of shooting the shit. But it's absolutely true. These guys, for all their anti-establishment talk, like, their preferred experts on COVID are people that come out of Koch-funded think tanks. Their preferred strategy for dealing with COVID is the same denial that's happening at the federal level from Joe Biden's administration than it happened from Trump's administration. I mean, you're not. You're not you're anti-mandates. Well, guess what? So is the fucking government. Right. Biden had to be pushed into that reluctantly after months of delaying because the Chamber of Commerce and other industry lobbies were fighting against OSHA rules. And then his OSHA is limited to, it doesn't even cover every fucking workplace. I mean, this is like, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make it make sense. Explain it to me like I'm 5.
And by the way, on DeSantis, this isn't getting any attention because the media is too busy writing the same piece that he's the more palatable version of Trump. Ron DeSantis, as we speak, if you live in Florida, he's literally trying to hijack public education. He's trying to take over public education in Florida to the point where he's pushing a bill that would strip university presidents of the ability to hire their own staff. He's pushing bills that would dictate what is and is not taught in universities. So do not tell me. You could talk about Democratic Party, Silicon Valley, they're in bed with the Democratic Party and censorship. Fine. I cover that too. There's validity to that. Don't tell me you care about freedom of speech if you were quiet on people like Ron DeSantis. And by the way, for anyone that wants to see, I just dropped it in the chat. Here's Glenn Greenwald's own words in support of Citizens United under some bastardized version of the First Amendment. Moving on, because I want to hit two other topics. Walker, I labeled this. Oh yeah, there's the tweet too. I agree with the ACL, various labor unions, blah 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 blah, various labor unions and anti-Wall Street Governor Elliot Spitzer that the First Amendment bars the government from prohibiting the use of money for political speech.
Bullshit.
Yeah,
bullshit. No, it does not. Absolutely not. And the Buckley ruling was complete nonsense. It acknowledged that the government has a compelling interest in limiting not only corruption but the appearance of it. Well, things look pretty fucking corrupt today. You know, that is absolutely nonsensical. Greenwald's position, I find it very hard to reconcile with his image as this anti-establishment, you know, crusader, I guess.
And by the way,
tariffs on all sides.
And by the way, to be clear, his whatever you want to call him, business partner Tucker Carlson. Just read the New York Times profile on Tucker Carlson. He was a establishment yuppie. I don't know, Harvard or whatever Ivy League he went to. He comes from money, and he was team establishment Republican orthodoxy from the school of Jeb Bush until 4 years ago. People that know Tucker Carlson that the New York Times spoke to said he's unrecognizable because he literally just became this once he got a Fox News show. So Tucker Carlson is another late stage grifter. This is not who he was for his whole career. He's become this because he saw an opening for it under the Trump era. So you have to really watch when people say, oh, Tucker is like a right-wing populist. No, he's not. He's a right-wing grifter. This was not who Tucker Carlson was when he was an MSNBC host, when he was a CNN host.
He's a fascist. Tucker Carlson is a fascist. He tells his fucking audience, you know, consistently that immigrants make this country dirtier, that diversity isn't our. First of all, if you know anything about World War II and how we cracked, you know, the Nazi code and how we fought the Nazis, then you know why diversity is our strength. It doesn't need to be fucking answered for you. And he repeats that consistently. Like, how is diversity our strength? Nobody seems to know an answer of how diversity is our strength. How exactly is a nation that doesn't, you know, like, he is one of the most dishonest and dangerous people I think that alive today. I mean, Tucker Carlson is extraordinary. Watching his segments, he ties things together that just don't like belong. I don't know a better way to explain this, but like he'll say like, you know, people are struggling and prices are going up. And by the way, immigrants are bad and they're making this country dirty. And the elites don't want you to know that immigrants are bad and making it's like that's Tucker's entire message.
Right.
He is extraordinarily dishonest.
And before we move on to the next topic, since this is usually happy hour and haters, Colin, hit me with a couple hateful comments so I could have fun with these. I haven't seen any of them. So these are the haters. I don't know their comments. Okay. So I wrote, but vote for me. Because Biden, somebody tweeted, Biden is unlikely to take the bold steps to protect women's rights to have an abortion that Democratic lawmakers have called for. So I wrote, mocking Biden, but vote for me. So somebody wrote, Jordan will follow this advice in 2024. Oh, I love this one. Thank you. So this I get a lot, Walker. I don't know if you get it too.
All the time.
Well, you voted for him, so you got what you wanted. I get. You told people to vote for him, and whenever I ask where, right.
Doesn't get answered.
So I'm not going to get into the whole explanation of why I voted for him. Status Coup viewers have already heard it. Why I voted for him. Number one, I've always said to people, please post the video where I told anyone to vote for Joe Biden. Please post the video where I told anyone to vote for Joe Biden, because it doesn't exist. Not only Joe Biden, I have always said, even when I was covering Bernie, vote for who you want. I don't really think it's a journalist's role. Some do. I don't really think it's a journalist's role to be like urging viewers who to vote for, right? I say, I've said, this is who I'm voting for. Here are my reasons. You don't have to agree. Vote for who you want. So put that aside. But in 2024, I don't know what I'm going to do because I don't know the conditions. I don't know who's running, et cetera, et cetera. But I will say this idea that you somehow calling out Biden's corruption or covering Democratic Party corruption or breaking news on Democratic Party corruption, you somehow can't do it if you personally voted for him. I don't really get that. For example, my coverage didn't change in 2020. I was very critical of Biden. I continued covering him aggressively, even though I personally voted for him. So to me, I don't really get, like, journalistically, there are journalists who do have a bias or do make personal decisions where it doesn't actually affect anything. So to me, it almost seems like people who, like this person, is probably the type of person that has rightfully been bitching about people shaming them for voting third party, but they have this real moral desire to shame others for how they vote. Don't bitch about people vote shaming you if you voted third party and then turning around and vote shaming them. By the way, do you tweet that to Jimmy Dore, who voted for Democrat Tulsi Gabbard? Or is it just about Joe Biden and voting for Joe Biden?
Wait, can we talk about Tulsi for a minute?
One second. So to that person, I say, listen, I've given my reasons why I voted for him. I don't need to explain it again. I didn't tell people how to vote. I don't care who you vote for in 2024. You could vote Democrat. I would advise you not to vote for Republicans, but do whatever you want. Third party, or don't vote. I think you should vote because people fought for it, but that's my opinion. Now, but this whole idea of, like, if you point out Democratic Party corruption, you're like somehow a fake because you voted for it. Yeah, I gave my reasons why I voted for it because I was out there and I actually covered Trump in the flesh. I was at what I felt were New Age Klan rallies. So I said to myself, you know what? I'd really rather deal with the devil I know, which is neoliberalism, Neera Tanden, Wall Street, than Trump, QAnon, Rudy Giuliani. And again, the deciding factor for me is, you think Trump was joking about going for a third term? Do you think he was joking? And by the way, these same people who say it, they somehow forget. I voted for Jill Stein in 2016. I actually lost one of my good friends because I did that. So
me too.
You know, but the point is, vote for whoever you want. Stop being a Tom, Dick, and Harry and trying to vote shame others. Because you want to know something? If we're ever going to structurally change anything, you're probably going to have to convince some neoliberals to come over to your side. You're going to have to probably convince some conservatives to come over to your side, and moral preening at them isn't going to do it.
I also just want to say, I really don't actually care who people voted for in 2016 or in 2020 even, because in between then and now, we got hit with a global pandemic. We are facing a rogue Supreme Court and Democratic backsliding. If you're on the right side of those fights, then I'm with you. And if you're not, then I'm not. That's sort of where I stand. I know that that's maybe sort of blasphemous that, like, but politics is not, just because you're opposed to somebody on one issue or in one election does not mean that later on you won't find yourself in lockstep with them or in agreement on a certain fight. And that's, I think, that's important to remember. This is politics. No, it's a world where there are bad good guys and good bad guys. It's interesting, and people are people. So I don't know.
Yeah, but to me, honestly, at the end of the day, it's really less about voting for Biden, this and that. People want to feel superior. It's that old, like, I told you so, right? No, you didn't tell me anything. I expected this from Biden. I didn't vote for Biden, and most people who voted for Biden didn't vote for Biden because they love Joe Biden of the Democratic Party. It wasn't even a lesser of two evils kind of thing. It was, I genuinely, from what I was seeing, not on Twitter, in the flesh at these Trump rallies. Remember, I covered Trump rallies in 2016 across the country, and I covered them in 2020. I saw the evolution. Not that he wasn't dangerous in 2016, but it became a much, much darker thing 4 years later. The last rally I covered in Pennsylvania, it was at the height of the pandemic. You had 3,000 people dying. They were waving around their masks and tossing them on the ground as Trump was guiding them to do it. They had literally not Fox News on the screen, OANN, which is about as batshit crazy. It's not even right wing. It's loony conspiracy network. Trump was not dog whistling. He was literally basically suggesting black people are going to steal this election. So to me, when I was seeing that in person and covering it, I said to myself, you know what? For me, people can do whatever they want. But for my conscience, I felt, you know what? I'd rather actually fight Biden on day one, because that's what Bernie said. Unfortunately, Bernie didn't do it. I'd rather actually fight Biden on day one and get rid of this madman and fight the warmonger and the corrupt Wall Street servant that I know than Trump, who is becoming even more of a lunatic to me and a growing fascist. But overall,
he also presided over 400,000 American deaths.
Yes.
And his response to that was, we got to reopen America. Now, granted, Biden gave up on mitigations, and the country has, and he has presided now over more deaths than Trump has. And, you know, and there is not really, as you say, a resistance from, you know, from Bernie or anybody on that. Everybody's just sort of, okay, it's over. And I do want to address, somebody said that, you know, oh, Walker's fear of this is ridiculous or so insane. Personally, I'm not all that, you know, I'm personally not that afraid of COVID, because I live, you know, I work remotely. I live in a place now where there's, you know, it's pretty spread out, and I'm not that worried about myself, but I am worried about my loved ones.
Yeah.
I'm worried about disabled people, immunocompromised people who have to face a daily decision of whether to participate in society or risk their health and maybe die. Like, that's, yeah, and you should be worried about that too, because any left-wing movement worth its salt is going to care about people who are vulnerable and dying and getting debilitated. You should give a shit about that. And if you don't, I really question your commitment to progressive ideals.
Which brings us to the next topic. We need a quick drink break. And keep those super chats coming. I'll read them at the end. You know, I kind of compare what's going on with COVID right now to what I've seen with Flint for the last 8 years. And if you don't know, the charges against Rick Snyder were dropped this week. I'll get into that in a bit.
Taking another drink for that.
Just because the media is not talking about something, right? And I actually said this to my mom the other day. She's a good woman, but, you know, she doesn't know much because she works 6 days a week and she doesn't pay attention. And like most people, she's misinformed. I love her. I hope you're not watching, Mom. So I love you, Mom, but you're misinformed. So just because the media stopped covering Flint doesn't mean the water is now safe. Just because the media and the EPA say the water is fine doesn't mean it is. Sometimes when the media abdicates its duty and abandons its duty, right? You as a journalist or you as a person have to find out for yourself. That's why I've kept going to Flint, because very quickly, if you keep going to Flint, you'll realize this is not just still a crisis. It's a goddamn catastrophe. We're talking about people not quickly dying from a virus, but slowly over years dying because heavy metal poisoning doesn't kill you right away. You get sicker and sicker every year.
We're seeing some of that with COVID too. We are seeing later down the road consequences. Because every subsequent infection is worse. Within
the last 2 weeks, I found out 3 people that I interviewed less than a year ago died. Okay? These people are dying at relatively young ages. We're talking 50, 55, 60. I know people in their 40s right now that have multiple forms of cancer, no family history of cancer. They were healthy before this water switch. Why I bring this up is because just because CNN and these outlets don't have the clock on anymore, don't have the death count going up in real time, don't have the case count going up in real time, aren't doing anything on long COVID, it doesn't mean it's not happening. I could tell you, I called helping out a friend of mine who's suffering with long COVID. I won't get into details, but I called Johns Hopkins to try and help this friend get in. You know what the wait list is for Johns Hopkins for long COVID? Do you know, Walker?
I'm going to guess it's a very long time.
When I called a couple of weeks ago, it was 9 months. I called the other day, it's now a year. A year wait list for Johns Hopkins, which is one of the most prestigious health universities in this country for long COVID, because there's no appointments. They're just bombarded with long COVID. So if you don't care about that and you say Walker's just hysterical, well, go talk to the people who can't get out of bed that are young because they have long COVID or have crippling fatigue or can't work anymore. or can't
lost
play with their
children,
right?
Lost their child, or lost their family member, their mother, their brother, their father. I mean, throughout this pandemic, I've been reporting on it, and I've talked to people who have faced serious loss, who are immunocompromised, who have been told by their doctors that if they get COVID, they will die. I mean, I cannot fathom a progressive movement that does not look at these populations, at these individuals, at these demographics of people, and say, you know what, we have your back. There is no normalcy in COVID, in a pandemic, without disability justice. There is no normalcy without paid leave, without bereavement leave. I mean, without taking basic precautions to protect people, like masking with high quality masks. Why haven't we sent out masks to everybody? That's very simple. We could do that. Why aren't we producing child-size masks, high quality child-size masks, and sending them out so that kids can have, protection? I mean, it goes so far beyond just, either you get vaccinated or you don't. Or okay, we have to cut the spread of this virus. And if we don't, this pandemic is going to go on indefinitely, and unless we get super lucky and it mutates and becomes much less virulent and much less deadly, and over time. But that could take years. And in that time, people are getting sick. They're getting disabled. They're dying. I just can't see turning your back on that as a progressive.
Also, without getting into currently, because right now there's about 4 variants spreading. The one, Walker, you know a lot more about this than I, but BA4 and BA5 is spreading right now. The UK is always about a month ahead of us. Right now it's spreading like wildfire in the UK. It's said to be the most contagious. It's said to be incredibly evasive, even if you've had past infections, evading infection, evading vaccination. But just from a common sense perspective, just take off the team COVID, whether your team like it's over or your team like take it seriously. Just common sense perspective. Would you say it's good to continually getting reinfected with the flu? Would you say that's a good thing if you're a parent, if your child gets the flu every year? Would you say it's a good thing if your child got bronchitis?
Multiple times a year, Jordan. Multiple times a year.
Right. So there are now people that I know who have had it 3 times in a year. Okay. And, they're vaccinated, they're boosted, this and that. They're fine now, but we're seeing people that have had it. They're fine, ish. But then for whatever reason, months later, something pops up. For me, I had it early on in April 2020. I kicked it. And then later on in the year, I had a crippling cough, and they told me I have asthma, that it came from COVID. Now, that's not the worst thing to have asthma, but that's just one example. And I didn't have it right away. It came later in the year. And
but it's a vulnerability if you get sick again.
Exactly.
This is the problem, that subsequent infections have been shown to lead to worse outcomes down the road. It's better to not have gotten COVID at all than it is to get COVID once. It's better to get COVID once than it is to get it twice. It's better to get it twice than 3 times. I mean, this is just basic stuff. I mean, look, I understand. People are tired of this pandemic. I am too. I'm really, it's hard. It's hard to report on it. It's hard to be aware of what's going on and talking to medical professionals and then people who have suffered the worst. Like, that's awful. It's draining. But this is what's happening. This isn't some conspiracy. It's not like it's not a power grab. They're not doing anything. They're not trying to do anything to stop this. They're trying to tell you, learn to live with it, go do your job, and shut the fuck up. That's what's happening. That's the conspiracy, is that your life matters less than your economic output. I mean, this is like really cynical and gruesome stuff. Like, we should care. We should be outraged at the fact that people are having to risk their health to survive in a pandemic. and that our government is so ready to declare the crisis over without actually doing the work of governing and bringing it to an end.
Right. And by the way, I won't get into details, but I know somebody in my life right now that has cancer for the second time. They kicked it years ago, but now have cancer again. They need to get chemotherapy. They just went out to dinner with somebody, and that somebody just called them yesterday and told them, I have COVID. So this person with cancer was just exposed to someone with COVID. That's how easy it is. And you could even be responsible. You can try to not go out to eat indoors or try not to go in crowded areas. But when each variant is more and more contagious, there's a whole lot of people that are vulnerable, whether it's cancer or other things. But the bottom line is, there's another element of this, Walker, that I have a hard time understanding. How is it that the very same people who say, I'm the leader of the fight for Medicare for all, which Medicare for all means you're trusting the government to deliver, well, not to deliver it, but to basically run the healthcare system, right? So you're trusting the government to run the healthcare system. I'm for Medicare for all, but when there's a once in a lifetime pandemic, it's no big deal. It's just a cold.
This is the biggest. This is, and I say this without any degree of sarcasm or hyperbole. This is the worst public health crisis in a century. It is the biggest, most immediate crisis we face today. Climate change is existential for the entire human race. I understand that, but in terms of immediacy, this has it by, maybe by a hair, but it has it. If your response, if our government's response to this crisis is declare it's over, message that it's over, and don't do anything to stop it, and let people die so that the economy can continue with minimal disruption, which, by the way, isn't working out anyway because COVID is disrupting supply chains anyway and driving up costs. So, but if that's the response that we allow to get normalized, how the fuck do you think we're going to deal with something like climate change? What the hell do you think is going to, if people are bitching over masks now, if people are like losing their shit because, oh my gosh, I have to wear a mask in public, or I can't go to my favorite bar, I have to take drinks out. Like, if you're complaining over that stuff, how the hell do you think we're going to deal with a crisis like climate change, which is arguably going to require much bigger, changes on a large scale than this?
Right. Absolutely. Colin, I'm sending you something. It's a bit of breaking news. So when you have it, let me know. So the thing I'll say about this, I understand the human element. People want to return to their life. I mean, I'm on the road quite often. I haven't been recently because I have a slight tear in my ACL. But when I'm on the road, COVID's not a thing anymore. People, for the most part, you got to
stop aging, man. You just got to stop. You just got to decide to do it and stop aging.
Yeah, I got a lot of miles on these tires, but I'm in physical therapy right now for my knee because I tore my ACL. But bottom line is, I get the desire to move on. I get for people that are relatively young, might have had COVID already and they're still standing and they don't have any lingering effects, to be like, whatever, stop being hysterical. But at the end of the day, forget the labels, progressive, conservative, whatever. If you believe in the collective, if you believe in kind of a society, you can't not care about other people. You should care about trying to do whatever you can to stop not just the spread now, but a perennial thing, because this is going to continue to spread, and we might move out of, the variants might end up weakening and not being as contagious and virulent, but that doesn't mean you're not going to have a mass disability event in 5 to 7 years. That doesn't mean you're going to have another healthcare catastrophe separate from the for-profit health industry. That's where we're heading if long COVID continues to become such a big thing. Walker, I want to give you the breaking news. Nothing majorly serious, but a new strategy from Biden. And I know I've kept you longer than I said, so we'll wrap.
No, look, Jordan. Anytime you and I get together, it's a good time. And the fact that we have people here with weighing in and whatnot, it's fun. I'm enjoying myself.
Good.
I hope
now,
everybody is too, because
Biden's new strategy in a meeting with the governors indicates the new strategy, assuming Dems could pick up 2 Senate seats this year, is to go around Senator Manchin and Sinema next year and carve out a filibuster exception over their objection. Let me repeat. The brilliant idea from Biden is to carve out 2 Senate seats. 2 Senate seats. Oh, people are saying more Walker, more Walker. Is to carve out, to get 2 more senators to go around Manchin and Sinema's objection. Okay. I think that's a dumb strategy, but putting that aside, if that's your strategy, why isn't your messaging publicly tarring and feathering these obstructionists and saying these 2 senators, one who owns a coal company, whose family has made $5 million as a senator, whose daughter, possibly criminally, price gouged the EpiPen, a senator in Kirsten Sinema who a decade ago was for all the things she's blocking. I don't know what happened. Maybe it was the hair dye when she wears those pink wigs. Why that if you come vote for us, we're going to make these 2 obstructionists obsolete. We're going to go around them. That might rally more people. You'd have to actually deliver, which I don't promise you
hold
would.
a rally outside of Manchin's yacht.
Yes.
Hold a put the presidential seal behind you and speak just in that location. Address people. Get it, mobilize. I do think that, there are things you can do. Why he's been so, treated this guy with kid gloves is beyond me. I get that it's different if you've been, if you've lived through this, you come up in this system and you've made your friends. But at this point, we're really on close to the brink here. So you kind of have to act. I just, put a presidential seal behind you, stand there and say, this, Joe Manchin, who can hear me now, is holding up, codifying abortion rights for half of the population. And Joe Manchin is why we can't
not
have...
Not just that. Joe Manchin, a man, agreed to carve out, to make an exception for the filibuster for these 2 things, the debt ceiling, and I forget the other thing. Those 2 things, I agree with Senator Manchin. But Joe Manchin, if you're a woman, he's telling you that financial matters are more important than your life or death, because you could die if you have a back alley abortion. It's very simple. And women would rally behind Joe Biden. I even think progressives who can't stand Joe Biden would support that.
I think people would support that. Absolutely. I mean, look, this
but
is
the thing is, I'm going to say it in private meetings, so I don't have to ruffle feathers. This is the problem.
This is how you build political capital. Biden's not popular right now, but he could fix that. If he, it's probably a heavy lift at this point, but he probably could fix that if people genuinely felt he was fighting for them.
Walker, I hate to interrupt you, which I do sometimes, but we have a new poll because you just said Biden's not very popular right now. Colin, I sent it to you. You want to know how unpopular he is? 71% do not want Biden to run for re-election.
Oh my God.
7 in 10 Americans say they do not want Biden to run for a second term, according to a new poll that brings Biden's approval numbers to a low and his party braces for losses in November. A Harvard CAPS Harris poll shared exclusively with The Hill found that 71% of respondents do not think Biden should run for a second term, compared to 29%. I will say, because a lot of polling is bullshit and the methodology is usually bullshit, and I pointed that out during the Democratic Party, most of these polls skew older. Most of these polls, the majority of the people they poll tend to be 40 and up. So if 7 out of 10 that they poll,
you and I are getting there, Jordan. I'm waiting for the day that I get my phone call for a Harvard Harris poll.
Correct. But this is the thing. You're incredibly unpopular because all you have told the American people is what you can't do and what you won't do. Remember that infamous clip where I think it was a town hall, one of those CNN choreographed things for Biden that's usually slobbering over him. But I forget whether she was a teacher or not, or a student, said, we need a minimum $50,000 cancellation. And he said, I will not do that. I will not do that for you. So, yeah, you get unpopular when all you tell, imagine if you're bleeding out and the hospital says to you, yeah, I won't do the surgery.
No, it's ridiculous. I don't think Biden has the vision required to lead the country out of the crisis that we're in right now. But he is, not to borrow a phrase from my dad, so he's the only game in town right now. He is the president right now, and he has Congress and he has the Senate. So you gotta work with what you got. You got to pressure the guy who's in power now, and that it sucks. I doubt that he'll do it, but God, it's just, I don't know. Jordan, I want to ask you a question now. Mm-hmm. How do you, with all of the depressing shit going on, how do you stay sane and hold on to your,
antidepressants and whiskey?
That's how you get up and do this over, day after day?
Well, actually, that's a lie. That's a lie. So
come on.
Before, I don't mean to be cheesy. She might be watching. Before I met my wife, it was a lot harder because I didn't have that element in my life, which was love and support. So having my wife makes a big difference. But before I met her, a lot of these trips I took triggered depression because it's not like, it's not like a fun thing to go talk to people who are sick constantly and are getting sicker. It's not a fun thing to go talk to families of Black people that were murdered. It's not a fun thing to go interview homeless. When I say not a fun thing, I just mean it's disheartening.
It's draining. It's draining work. It's right. Look, it's also important work, but it is draining. And obviously, you're not comparing. I just want to point out that when we say that journalism is draining, we are not saying that what the journalist goes through is anything even comparable to what the people that the journalists that we're interviewing are going through. It's just you're constantly, and you in particular, Jordan, because you go all over the place and you cover all of these important stories, you are constantly talking to people who are going through just the worst. You're seeing the worst all the time.
And that's why I really, one thing that really infuriates me is when people say, Jordan, you're not angry enough. Don't tell me I'm not angry enough. You don't know the first fucking thing. Trust me, I'm plenty angry. But to answer your question, it's very hard. But I think one of the things that actually keeps me going, because there's a lot of times, and I've said it to Colin when we're on the road, what's the point of what we're doing? We're going live to 300 people because YouTube hides us in a cave. What's really the point of this? We're not changing anything. Nobody, Rick Snyder is not in prison. What's a lot of times I feel that way. Am I just spinning my wheels here? And Colin has said it to me, but also I read the comments. My wife thinks I read the comments for my ego. I don't read comments under the video for my ego. I read them to give me that answer. Why am I doing this? And the reason is because people appreciate it. And a lot of people depend on it because they're not getting this information anywhere else. So I think what keeps me going, I feel a certain responsibility to the residents of Flint, other communities that I have covered, because in their view, and they'll reach out to me on weekends at nights, in their view, they don't have a lot of other people to tell their story. And there comes a certain type of, and I have one of my faults is I have a hard time saying no. I could show you the DMs I have right now with 6 or 7 people promising interviews because I just have a problem saying no. My wife has told me this. But what keeps me going is the viewers who tell me this is desperately needed and you're the only one doing it, and the antidepressants and whiskey. So that's the order, and my wife and my dog. So that
sense of responsibility. I can really relate to that because a lot of the stories that you and I have both covered are stories that probably aren't going to get a lot of mainstream attention. I mean, actually, I should say I want to give credit to a fantastic journalist who actually writes for The Atlantic, of all places. But Ed Young has done phenomenal COVID reporting. That said, there aren't really that many people out there still covering this. So yeah, I know, I totally get it. And when you and I first met, I was like, why you keep going back to Flint? Like, the crisis is still going on, but you keep going back, and everybody's moved on. Like, I didn't fully understand it, I think. And over time, as I've grown as a journalist, and you caught me when I was really new at this. Over time, I've come to appreciate it a lot more, and really, develop just a very deep respect for being able to stick with the story, tell the story as it needs to be told, talk to the people who need to be talked to, lift them up. I mean, that's really important work. And I really have just tremendous respect for you and your commitment to, Flint and everything. So,
Why, thank you. You just made this fun happy hour a little emotional. But which actually brings me to the final thing, and we'll read super chats too, because we called this catastrophe. That's what I put in the headline, and Colin made a badass thumbnail too, by the way. But first off, to the audience, I just want you to know, I can't get into details, but we do have another major Flint bomb coming. This will be my 5th major Flint investigation that the mainstream media has ignored, but it's coming out soon. I wanted it to come out before, if for people that have been watching, I predicted that the charges were going to get dropped against Snyder, based on what I was hearing and sources, and unfortunately I was right. But nonetheless, even though they were dropped, I have a major story coming out that I don't think is going to look so good for Mr. Snyder. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to say exactly when, because when you're at the mercy of other outlets, you have to deal with their process, editors, legal. But the story is done. It's pretty juicy. So get your popcorn and your pitchforks.
I know this. Wait.
Yeah.
You're probably like, oh God, I want it to come out like tomorrow. Like, what the hell? Yeah. I get it.
Fiona, I would just drop it, but the blessing of being an independent outlet and the curse of being an independent outlet with no money, I don't have a legal department. So if I just publish these stories on StatusCoup.com, besides the fact that it would not have the same reach as like The Guardian, which I published in January, a Flint story, when you publish with these other outlets, you're under their legal protections. So if politicians or even the Attorney General of Michigan want to go after you for sources, for how, whatever, at least it's not going to bankrupt Status Coup. So that's why, in addition to, at this point, doing it with outlets like The Guardian, Vice, who have done it within the past, The Intercept, reaches more eyeballs, you get legal protection, because I'm not like reporting minor things. We have a lot of documents from the criminal investigation that we obtained that were confidential. We have very sensitive material that if the New York Times or the Washington Post publishes it, they got a goddamn army of lawyers. They're good. If we publish it,
you need the protection of an outlet to do that. They'll haul your ass into court.
Correct. But putting aside, there is another story coming. If you're a Status Coup member, maybe I'll share some details in the members call next week. Hint, hint. StatusCoup.com/join. Become a member for $5 to $10 a month. But this week, charges were dropped against Governor Snyder. Just to really dumb it down, because I don't want to get in the weeds. There was a Flint water investigation that started in 2016. That was led by a special prosecutor. Think like Robert Mueller was the special prosecutor for Russia. There was a Robert Mueller, but only covering the Flint, prosecuting the Flint case. The current Democratic Attorney General, Dana Nessel, who MSNBC loves, she comes on all the time to fight for democracy and fight Trump. When she came into office in 2019, she fired the special prosecutor. She fired the team that had been investigating for 3 years. The reasons she gave didn't make a lot of sense. Based on my sourcing, she fired them for political reasons because they were appointed by her predecessor, a Republican Attorney General, and she didn't want that Republican Attorney General and his team to get the credit for convictions. So she cleaned house and she restarted from scratch. This is the current Attorney General, Dana Nessel. She put in place of the special prosecutor, who, by the way, had charged 15 state and city officials with crimes in 3 years. It's a pretty significant thing. He charged 15 state of Michigan and city of Flint officials with crimes. 2 of them were the highest levels of the health department were going to trial for involuntary manslaughter. She fired that team. She put in prosecutors who couldn't prosecute their way out of a ham sandwich, who don't have any experience investigating serious financial fraud, which Flint, the dark underbelly of the Flint water crisis, was there was a financial fraud, financial scam that led to Flint even using the Flint River. Anyway, she puts them in. They used a one-man grand jury to indict the governor and 7 other defendants. In English, a one-man grand jury just means a judge. So instead of a prosecutor bringing the indictments, she used a one-man grand jury, which is a judge issuing the indictments. Their theory for why they used the one-man grand jury was it would expedite the process. It would make it quicker. Well, the Michigan Supreme Court, just in a 6-0 decision, so not like, 3 Republican judge and 2 Democrats, 6-0. They just ruled that what she did was unconstitutional. And this is why, using a one-man grand jury, they said that a judge can issue subpoenas, can issue search warrants, but cannot himself issue indictments, him or herself. So that's why the charges against Snyder were dropped. Technically, they could refile them under a different process, but I got news for you. We're talking 8 years later. There's statute of limitations for certain crimes in Michigan that have already run out. And also, if you're recharging, that's not going to happen overnight. To recharge them, it's probably going to take 6 months to a year. And then you're going to have witnesses come on the stand 9 years later with memories aren't as sharp, that kind of thing. I don't want to say no. I don't want to say never. I don't want to say it's doubtful that he will be recharged, but I wouldn't bank on it that Snyder is going to be recharged. And by the way, the 7 other defendants who were charged with everything from involuntary manslaughter to extortion to perjury to obstruction of justice. Why this is important, and I would go on a rant, but I'm going to save that for after this next Flint bomb comes out. Walker and I talked about democracy earlier, and do we have a democracy? Well, I don't really know, besides the voting aspect, because I don't think you could call it a democracy. We have an electoral college. The popular vote winner doesn't even win. Put that aside. I don't really know how you could actually have a democracy when the citizenry, in this case 100,000 people, were poisoned by their government, whether it was gross incompetence, which is a very benefit of the doubt version, or they knew and they covered it up, which is what I've reported. Snyder, he was charged, by the way, Walker, with a misdemeanor, willful neglect of duty. My reporting shows the opposite. He wasn't neglecting his duty. He was actively helping to cover up a deadly disease spreading through that water a few weeks before he was up for re-election. Because back then in 2014, he actually wanted to run for president in 2016. This was before Trump. So I don't really know how you could say we have a democracy when the legal system in this country is set up to protect the wealthy. This governor is worth $200 million. He has had an army of attorneys fighting this misdemeanor. Okay? You or me, we'd already be in prison. Okay? If you, even if you want to say, well, it was just incompetence, whatever. If you're the governor and a city was poisoned and you did nothing for 18 months, and it's not like they didn't know, my reporting has shown, other reporting has shown, they were actively working to stop it from getting out in the national media. They were actively working, telling the residents the water's fine. Don't believe your lying eyes that it's brown. Don't believe the rashes on your arm. This is some sinister, murderous shit. Okay, and then not only after the fact, when it did become a national scandal, there was a secondary cover-up. They cheated on the water testing, which I broke. They manipulated the water testing, and then they declared it over, shut down the water pods that the poisoned majority black, and a lot of poor white people depended on. They needed those water stations. You remember the scenes, lines around the block for water. They shut them down, citing manipulated data. We've talked about COVID, how we don't even know what the real data is because they're hiding it right now. Same shit in Flint. So bottom line, I'm not going to stop covering Flint just because the charges were dropped. I'm going to continue investigating it. To me, the success or failure of Flint is not whether I personally put Rick Snyder in jail. I don't have that power. To me, the success or failure is, do the people of Flint, is someone still fighting to expose the truth, even if it's not going to get them criminal justice?
Maybe one day, Jordan, you and I will write a book.
Correct. Well, actually, I reached out. I'm going to make an announcement about this maybe next week, but come the fall, I might be taking some time off, not for a vacation, but to possibly work on a book or a documentary. In my time off, I will need, it might be one person, it might be a whole committee to keep the channel going. So I'll have more on that next week. But bottom line, I've done everything I can. I'm not done. Call me old-fashioned, Walker. I think if you're a journalist worth your salt, you should not be neutral to a whole goddamn city being poisoned. You should not be neutral to a whole goddamn city being poisoned and then left to slowly die. You should not be neutral to a poisoned city being gaslit by the politicians and the media that your water is fine, even though they're there, they smell it, they still see it. I just spoke with residents less than a year ago. They were showing me their rashes 8 years later. Not like scars from 8 years ago, active rashes they're getting. People were showing me their bald spots because they're still losing hair in the back. So bottom line, I'm going to keep covering it. And you want to know something, Walker? It's not profitable. It's not something it's not something that goes viral, just like your COVID coverage, even still.
Look, Jordan, the parallels between what you just described and COVID are,
yes,
I mean, just it's ridiculous. It's just there's so much similarity between the two crises. We have to do better, people, as a country. This cannot be how we handle crisis, that, and particular crisis that affects the most vulnerable communities. Sort of, oh, that doesn't matter. It affects them. It doesn't affect me. That can't be how we approach problems.
Correct. And by the way, and this is a big problem I have with people, even in our own independent media circle. I know it's not the sexy thing. I know, and credit Ryan Grimm had me on today on this on the Hill. The Intercept has published my work. People who shit on the Intercept, well, there's not many outlets that have been willing to publish my Flint reporting. Actually, NBC News, an editor, basically told me, hey, we appreciate what you're doing, but this happened so long ago, we don't think the people care. Sorry. That was an editor at NBC News told me. And I said, this was for a story, by the way, that I had documents showing that the governor's top officials erased their phones right before the launch of a Flint criminal investigation. I said to this NBC News editor, Walker, we were speaking on the phone. I wasn't as calm as I am right now. I said to this NBC News editor, let me ask you a question and tell me the truth. If you or NBC News got evidence that Donald Trump's chief of staff or the head of the CDC or the head of, name your agency, but some top officials in the Trump administration, if you found evidence that their phones were erased and all their messages were gone for January, February, and March 2020, before the coronavirus became a global catastrophe, would you think that's a story? And she said, this person literally said this to me. Well, that's apples and oranges. I said, why is that?
No, it's almost, in fact, it's almost a perfect parallel, right? Like,
right.
Media at first, it's a crisis. And oh my gosh, who is responsible? Well, it's the Republican. And okay, now the crisis is, they might have fucked with the testing, but okay, but now the crisis is over and it's old news and people are tired of hearing about it, so we move on. And the crisis continues. People continue to suffer and media completely ignores it and people aren't held accountable. It's a perfect parallel to COVID. It's just,
bottom line, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to go on a rant just because I try not to be too over the top right before a major story is coming out. But when I break this story, the next nuclear attack's coming, and it's coming from me. Let's read some super chats. Walker, I apologize to your fiance for keeping you for 2 hours. I hope your Friday's not ruined.
No, it's okay. She's right here. Yeah.
Okay, good. Let me read some super chats. Arlene, $20. Cheers. Sipping Cabernet Sauvignon made with organic grapes. Delicious. I'm more of a Pinot Noir guy, but that's cool. Thank you, Arlene. Kai Yate, $5. Kai Yate, $5. I'm sorry. How many days of work do I need to miss without pay to vote hard enough? Apparently, one isn't cutting it. Maybe make November 3rd a holiday. Yep. Couldn't have said it better. Tony Dallas, $5. Dems have become the Delta Airlines party. I'm sorry, sir. There is nothing we could do. F that chicken shit behavior. Correct, Tony. And by the way, Kate, to your comment, because I just remembered this, the people propping up Ron DeSantis, by the way, including Joe Rogan, who just said he would endorse him. I guess they're forgetting that Florida voters on a ballot voted to restore voting rights for felons. Remember that? Florida voters on a ballot measure voted to restore voting rights for felons, which, let's be clear, would have given voting rights to a lot of black Floridians and poor white people that might have helped the Democratic Party. And Ron DeSantis and the Republican Party essentially issued a poll tax to make that more difficult. How's that for, freedom? Lana Del hates the clock, $10. Congress can use the exceptions clause, Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution, for new laws which renders the Supreme Court inert by proclaiming them barred from reviewing the law. Speak to Dr. Joe Firestone for more. That's info. That's interesting. Lana, do you mind emailing me his name? info@statuscoup.com. I'd appreciate that. Larry, $4.99. I've entertained the idea that the administration knows the world is going to end as we know it next year, so they're just trying to coast. That's possible, but Biden has grandkids, so you would think he cares. Pelosi's always talking about the children, so you would think. Southern Sass, $9.99. I need therapy, and I won't go get therapy because I'm a female who lives in Arkansas, and I do not have any guarantee to my right to privacy anymore. Fucked up. Southern Sass, that is true, and I got to be honest, Walker, we are two dudes, so that's a disclaimer. They're even talking about now surveilling or taking the data from women's period trackers. I mean,
it's completely sick. It's about power and and control. Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to hop on?
You can come on.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah. Better Luger, $4.99. Where did Glenn support Citizens United? I put it in the chat. If you just Google Glenn Greenwald Salon and Citizens United, it'll come up. He wrote a glowing support of Citizens United. By the way, in his blog in 2005, sure, people could evolve, but at least Glenn circa 2005 was talking the same anti-immigrant fervor as the modern day Republican Party. He was against illegal immigration is what he called it.
You don't even have to go that far back to find him supporting Citizens United on Twitter. And the tweet reads, I'm reading it right now. It's from August 30th, 2021 at 8:18 p.m. I agree with the ACLU, various labor unions, and anti-Wall Street Governor Eliot Spitzer that the First Amendment bars the government from prohibiting the use of money for political speech.
I just put it in the chat, by the way. That's so.
It's right there.
That tweet, that's his view. It's wrong. Chris, $5. Please keep having Walker on. Ignore the haters. You're right. Thank you, Walker, for standing up for the immunocompromised with COVID. We're getting sacrificed for dollars. Keep feeding us that $5. I'll have Walker on until you're blue in the face. Thank you, because we do need financial support. This isn't cheap. Humorous, $5. It's very difficult to support this channel with super chats. There always seemed to be some kind of problem, Jordan. There's no problem because yours came up. So thank you for the super chat. I don't know what technical problems you had in the past. That's on YouTube's end, not our end. Maybe YouTube is blocking you from super chats for some reason, but this one worked. So thank you so much for the super chat. Humorous, $10. The GOP started the first civil war. The GOP is trying to start the second one. The Democratic Party doesn't seem to try to stop that reality. That's dangerous. Yes, I would just make the point, humorous. The difference between now and good old Abe, we didn't have Citizens United, and we didn't have there were always special interests throughout society, but there wasn't the goddamn tsunami of money in politics back in the 1800s. So people like Abraham Lincoln, could have a little courage.
Technically, the South started that war.
Correct.
Firing Fort Sumter, and the Republicans at that time were the Union Party. So,
why do you got to be so goddamn literal? No, you're right.
I know, I'm a bit pedantic. I apologize.
Humorous, $5. Trump wasn't joking at all. He wanted to do the exact same thing Putin did, make him dictator forever. Yeah, that was part of why I said I personally. Do you think Trump is joking when he's pushing a third term as a joke? I don't. And judging by what we found out this week, that he was, hey, let him in with a bazooka gun. We need to stop this. What makes you think this man wouldn't try for a third term or fourth term? Levon Huey, fight the power. Dana Nessel, Barack Obama, Trump, and greasy Gretchen Whitmer are accessories to murder in Flint. They should be locked up with Rick Snyder. By the way, that's a good point. I didn't even bring it up. Gretchen Whitmer, a lot of Flint residents were happy to vote for her. They thought, finally, Democrats coming in, we'll get some justice, we'll get some help. Whitmer ran on reopening those shut down water stations that Snyder shut down. She didn't reopen them. She hasn't done a goddamn thing for Flint. She's a Democrat. And by the way, her daddy ran Blue Cross Blue Shield in Michigan. So that's all you really need to know. Teresa, $5. Thank you. Sable Miner, $10. Don't celebrate the 4th. Boo imperialism, America. If my wife wouldn't punch me, because, she wants me to take off, I was thinking of having a United Corporations of America marathon, and every hour pointing out one corporation or Neanderthal plutocrat we should not be celebrating. I was thinking about doing that on the 4th of July because I don't really have a life. So we'll see. Maybe I'll do it. United Corporations of America marathon. Actually, I can't. I can't make Colin work on the 4th of July. That would be rude. Humorous, $5. We only had 2 jobs. People take care of each other, take care of the planet, and all the things would be given unto us for free. Yeah, I think that would be pretty good if we took care for each other and the planet. But that's not the capitalist system. Tony, $2. Is there any legal insurance for a journalist? If you work at a corporate outlet with enough money to have lawyers on retainer and, we have insurance for our equipment, which isn't cheap. So the live view we have insurance for, if it's damaged, if it's lost. We have errors and omission insurance, which is basically kind of if you get something wrong or omit something, even if it's just over, sloppiness, journalistic sloppiness. We have insurance for that. But we don't have insurance like if the attorney general or a politician wants to sue us, we'd have to pay for our defense. So that's the difference. Humanity, Huthanity, I don't know what that word is. $9.99. Hang in there, gang. Everything sucks right now, but the pendulum is about to swing back around. I hope you're right.
Hope you're right.
Beta virus, $2. I implore you to try smoking weed. It works well. I typically get high about 5 times a year. The last time I got high was on 420. I did take a video of it because it was fucking fantastic. I tend to have the opposite. Marijuana tends to have the opposite effect of mellowing me out. I become extremely giggly, extremely loopy, very funny, and hungry.
See, I get a little paranoid sometimes. It's I don't know. I go through phases. Like I'll smoke a lot for, a short period of time, and then I won't smoke again for months.
Right.
It's but my relationship with weed.
If you want, we could have a super chat marathon where I get high before I come on. I might lose half my audience, but that could be fun. Humorous, $5. I put this link everywhere on corporate media. We really need to support channels like Status Coup. There's a lot of them. I do. Why? Thank you for sharing it. Another $5 from Humorous. Can have weed forever until we get rid of the GOP and the Democratic Party and literally only go with green and progressive. Listen, there's corruption wherever you go. There's problems in the Green Party. I won't even get into MPP because that's a fucking joke. But at the end of the day, I say we have to hold people accountable, even Bernie, even the squad. It's not enough just to It's not enough anymore to actually be with us on policy. You have to have a strategy to fight. You have to have a strategy to rally the troops. You have to have a strategy to pressure politicians to do the right thing. So I'd like to see
a coherent ideology.
Correct. Humorous. $200. Holy cow. Humorous. That is not humorous. That's very, very serious and appreciated. Thank you for that incredible donation. We should no longer vote for the Republican GOP. That's a cult. We shouldn't vote for the Democrats because they won't stop the GOP from trying to start the second civil war. These are not people we want to represent us in Congress anymore. Time to go green and progressive. I'll add to this. I think people need to really, you could vote for whomever you want, like I said. People need to start looking at, we're starting to see some victories outside of the electoral system. Worker power. Now Trader Joe's is starting to have success with the unionization effort. We've seen what the Starbucks union has done. I think they're at like 150 unionized stores now. Amazon is currently trying to overturn the historic Staten Island victory. But I just interviewed Amazon workers in North Carolina who are trying to unionize. There's one in Albany now that are starting a union campaign. It's not just the unions, workers who are going on strike, tenants unions. There are good things, hopeful things happening outside of the electoral system. So look in your community, even if you're not at one of these places that are unionizing, I promise you there's probably groups, whether it's tenants unions, healthcare, climate, there's probably groups in your community right now organizing for something. So,
but don't neglect the electoral stuff either, because all those victories could be stripped away.
Correct. Fly Chomper Fly, $2. I have a publisher and distributor who could help. Hey, if you email me, info@statuscoup.com. I just spoke with one person who thinks I have a good book idea, but I'm open to talking to anyone. I want to get a Flint book published before I'm dead, and I really want.
Have you ever read Devil in the White City?
No.
You should read Devil in the White. I recommend this to everybody watching. The Devil in the White City is a fantastic book. It sort of recounts the history of the Chicago World's Fair, as alongside the history of America's first serial killer, H.H. Holmes, and it weaves those stories together. You should read it, and we should talk about Flint and COVID.
My wife just screamed down, "That's one of my favorite books."
Oh, it's fantastic! It's a great book.
By the way, my wife has a bit of a crush on you. I don't know if you know that. not like romantically, but she thinks you're very on the ball with COVID. So she's always saying you should be more like Walker.
You should both come and visit us. That's what's going to happen.
Okay, that's fine. We'll talk. Humorous. Fly Chomper Fly, email me if you have a publisher. I want to hear from you. info@statuscoup.com. Humorous, $10. What is spreading is white supremacy and totalitarianism in America. That's a sad, sad thing, especially when only 26% of the voting bloc is actually accomplishing it. I agree with you. And by the way, totalitarianism comes in all forms. It's not just, maniacal, crazy people like Trump. DeSantis, if you're in Florida, what he's doing is totalitarianism. If you're in Texas, this governor was trying to fucking have child protective services go after parents with transgender kids. Are you kidding me? Tracking women's period trackers. I mean, the list goes on of insane things. By the way, let's not let the Democratic Party off the hook, because they do a lot of regressive shit too. Maybe not that crazy, but there's plenty of shit going on that falls into authoritative with the Democratic Party too.
I mean, you gotta think, what percentage of America is trans? And then, honestly, like what percentage of America? I don't have the answer. I just throwing that out there, because when you're targeting a group that is a very small group that cannot protect itself, like that's extraordinarily troubling. And the Republicans have taken this very small minority group, this vulnerable group, and lifted them up as sort of the enemy, a symbol for what's wrong with America, and how traditional values are being destroyed. And that is extraordinarily troubling. As a Jewish journalist, when Jews were targeted in Germany, they were less than 1% of the population. I think they were something about 0.73% of the German population in 1933 was Jewish. Like, you go after groups that can't protect themselves, and you do it with the cover of with the power of the state, and that's how genocides begin. And it's like, if your political project hinges on vilifying people who can't protect themselves, small minority group that can't protect themselves, it deserves to fail. And it warrants fierce opposition. I mean, I just find myself increasingly shocked and disgusted at the new depths that the Republican Party seems to be descending to in relation to the LGBTQIA community. And just wanted to put that out there. Be aware of it. Don't, the people say, oh, we got to sacrifice X or Y to appeal to a broader. No, fuck that. You have to defend people who cannot, without help, protect themselves. You have to stand with groups that are under attack.
I agree.
It's that simple.
CC 49.99. Thank you so much. Look into the township of Penn in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, forcing Cox to install a pollution basin against Cox's wishes. Nothing being done. Cox wants EPA help. They don't trust the corrupt township. This is still going on and township approved. I have not a clue what you're talking about. Email me more info. info@statuscoup.com. Thank you for the generous super chat, but email me more info. info@statuscoup.com. I'm actually, it's not imminent, but I want to take another reporting tour. I'd probably start by driving through Pennsylvania, so maybe that's something I could stop and cover. So email me, info@statuscoup.com. We're almost done. Peace Walker, $5. Let's not kid ourselves. We don't have a Democratic Party. It's the right party and the fascist party. Yeah, I mean, I think it's basically, the Democratic Party right now is essentially the Republican Party of the 90s. I mean, that's really what it is. I think there's different colors of fascism. I think the Republican Party is certainly a little further in terms of fascism, but Standing Rock was fascism, and Obama did nothing. So yeah, Peace Walker, $5. Oh, I just read that. Humorous, $10. Why did the Democratic Party put down the new and rising Progressive Party, Green Party, which is actually on the Democratic side? Why did they do that? That makes them as bad as Republicans. Put down the new and rising Progressive Party, Green Party, because they.
I think this is referring to trying to get the Green Party off the ballot in states across the country. And I think that the reason for that is very clear, that they feel that the Green Party dilutes their vote share. And the validity behind that, I would dispute, because I think that, if the Green Party weren't on the ballot, those folks who vote Green just probably in large part wouldn't vote. And if you're the Democrats and you're the reason why the Green Party isn't on the ballot, you're probably not going to get Green voters to be like, oh, well, they took away my choice and now I got to vote for that. I don't think that's going to happen. So
right. Absolutely.
Yeah. But it's
humorous. Apathy sucks, $10. Jordan, people need to get out of their own echo chambers, or else the tyranny will continue. We are in the New World Order. Depopulation is their goal. Dr. Ariana Love on Telegram, speaking truth. I will say to the first part, absolutely. I think tribalism has become a fucking cancer, especially on the internet. I think people, very much like Fox News and CNN and MSNBC online, people want to go to their own teams to hear their own opinions validated. And if you dare say something that's a little critical of someone, of a host I like, or a journalist I like, fuck you, I'm unsubscribing. Got to get, even with me, even if you like my journalism and, my takes, you should not bow down to certain people. You should always try to consider other opinions, even if they're not, you might learn something, or you might change your view on something. Two more, humorous, $5. You go apathy. You got apathy. Everyone needs to support the truth of this country. Jordan is very good at that. Thank you. And one more from humorous, $10. You're doing it, Jordan, because you have a moral compass that functions and you're telling people the truth about what they don't know. That's important, bro. Thank you. And thank you, Walker. I didn't know we were going to go for 2.5 hours, but I enjoyed it.
Me
Walker,
too. Always a good
Walker,
time.
people can follow you on Twitter. Tell people where they can follow you.
Yep. I'm on Twitter. I'm not doing any reporting right now. Doing comms for Nomiki Khan's New York State Senate campaign, and working on her policy platforms with her. And so if you're in New York's District 59, that's that. Also, co-founded the Opt-Out News app for independent media. So lots of good outlets are on there, including Status Coup. And it's on iOS right now. We're in the process of getting it on Android. We're in the approvals process, and that's taking a little bit of time, but we're very hopeful that it will soon be up for Android as well. Check it out. Just if you look in the App Store on Apple, it's Opt-Out, one word, and then News, and you can find the app. We're very proud of it. Alex Koch is the other co-founder. He's the guy whose brainchild it is. He's an award-winning money and politics reporter. Check out his stuff as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Walker. We'll do this again soon. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for watching. 4th of July will probably be off. No, we'll be off. We all need to enjoy celebrating this corrupt country. Back at it on Tuesday. Please, if you're new here, consider signing up. StatusCoup.com/join. You can become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Thank Colin for listening to both of us for the last 2.5 hours and showing things on the screen and all that. And we will be back at it on Tuesday. We'll have some videos this weekend too. And again, pretty big Flint story coming, so stay tuned for that. And also, I should say, one more reminder: get your Fossil Fucker shirt. StatusCoup.com/store. StatusCoup.com/store. You could also get your United Corporations of America shirt in the StatusCoup.com/store. It's wonderful beach weather, and it's a great conversation starter if you're single. To talk to other people. I'll also say, roughly speaking, if you live on the East Coast, I want to probably in the month of July, we're going to be doing another reporting road trip. The theme will be inflation, and people economically being fucked. Not just from inflation, but you were fucked economically before COVID. You got fucked more during COVID, and now you're fucked from inflation. So it's not going to be called the Inflation Reporting Tour, but basically another reporting trip to show the dead carcass of the American people. So if you have a story on the East Coast, because we're going to be driving because there's no flights anymore, they're all canceled, definitely email us, info@statuscoup.com, info@statuscoup.com. Maybe we'll stop in your neck of the woods and interview you. So that should be coming up in the month of July, this month. So email us if you have a story, East Coast, and we'll go from there. Thank you, Walker, and we'll talk to you guys next week.